Welcome again to this week's edition of the People's Podcast. I am Nigel Barif, a board member at the A Different Book List Cultural Center. We are so excited today. We've got Thando, a good friend, Thando Hyman, DJ Power. We've got a number of artists that are going to be, an artist that's going to be joining us. But just before I jump off into the kind of formal agenda, just wanted to let you know that A Different Book List Community Center is committed to Black and Indigenous solidarity and acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And their 500 years of colonialism mirrors the 500 years of terror that Black and brown folks have gone through over that time period also. So we're doing this work in solidarity. Just to remind folks again, if you have any questions, you're welcome to send them to us. You can hit us up using the hashtag The People's Podcast or hashtag ADBCC events to see share your questions for today or any other events you want to have, or you can send us an email at svvadbcc@gmail.com. Look, whatever we all say here on this podcast is not a reflection or does not represent A Different Book List Cultural Center. They just brought us all here together. So my sister Thando Hyman is a dynamic educator, school principal, a professional career spanning over 20 years of administrative experience in the Toronto District School Board as a principal, instructional leader, literacy convener. She was first principal of the Toronto's groundbreaking Afrocentric alternative school and served as lead principal for 22 TDSB schools, as was a course director and adjunct professor at York University's Faculty of Education. Ms. Hyman's extensive community work also includes host of AWAF Roundtable on 89.5 CIUT FM radio, and is a founding board member of the African Canadian Legal Clinic. And then DJ Power, woo, is an award-winning DJ and producer and is a master at pleasing crowds worldwide with his productions and DJ style. He's produced and remixed tracks from artists such as 50 Cent, such as Sean Paul, Walshy, Wyclef, V-Vibe, Cartel, and many more. DJ Power is famous for his live remixing and mashup, blending trap, EDM, hip house, pop, dancehall, reggae, Latin, Afrobeat, soca, and currently he's finishing up a new EP. Man, yo, we need to get some music up in here, producers. And then in the background, you're gonna see Nicole Alexander, and Nicole is a visual artist currently living in Ontario, Canada. Her paintings in oil and acrylic and watercolor reflect the unique Afro-Caribbean vibe. Having grown up in Trinidad and Tobago, Nicole's inspiration stems from her love of dance, particularly the Canadian Caribbean folk dance, poetry, calypso, music, and most importantly, her culture and the beauty of her heritage. Like one of her favorite artists, Elizabeth Catlett, who fought through racial barriers to make a name for herself, Nicole creates her art for all people and enjoy. So what a wonderful, wonderful setup we've got here today at the People's Podcast. Thando, how's it going? I don't know.
Glad to be with you.
Welcome. And DJ Power, welcome.
Thank you.
And hi, Michelle. You want to give a wave while you're working, or she has us on mute? You want to wave this wave? Thanks. So today we wanted to thanks both of you for joining us. There's this other half of Thando that I don't know if people realize about the musician in you that you have in you, and DJ Power, your travels all over the world, and obviously we're at a watershed moment here in not only Toronto and in Canada and North America. Too many of our community members have been dying disproportionately at the hands of police, especially when you have when you have mental health issues. And so, as artists, as musicians, we really wanted to get a feel from you what how specifically Black music, and Black musicians can help us, not only heal but move to a bigger and stronger place. So maybe Thando, can I bring you in first and just ask you, what does Black music, how does that offer the healing and has, from historical point of view and moving forward in this crucial time?
Well, firstly, I'd like to recognize the many people in Toronto who worked tirelessly to make June Black Music Month in Toronto, Canada, and get not only city or local recognition, but national recognition. And so this being the month of Pride and the month of Indigenous history and Indigenous education, June stands as the month of Black Music Month. So I think about many musicologists and activists such as Norman Otis Richmond, who when he was on 88.1 CKLN, he was very steadfast in making sure that young people understood the history of the music, because even though we listen and we dance and we love the rhythms and we create and we produce, oftentimes nobody tells you about the history behind musical production. Want to call on the names of people like Phil Vassell, who was also quite instrumental in bringing urban music on a more national platform, Farley Flex, the Urban Music Association of Canada. All of these people and really worked hard and tirelessly to talk about Black music as not just something that can be commodified and popularized, but to talk about its intent, right? To talk about the history behind it. So, I see music as a barometer of the society. And because it's a barometer of the society, it tells a story. You get a sense of what is happening in the world. And in order to get that understanding of what is happening in the world, from the way that you create rhythms to the lyrics and the production of the music can definitely be a healer, a balm, a salve. It can be inspirational. It can be motivational. And because of that, right now, when we think about songs, and I want to get into that later on, I want to give you an opportunity, DJ Power, as well, to jump in there. This music inspires us to think through particular times in our history. So right now, it is the year 2020, and I had the good fortune of watching one of the seminal hip hop songs that was the mover and shaker of the day in the late 80s, early 90s, and that would have been hip hop music done by Public Enemy. The song in particular was Fight the Power. And to see that some 30 plus years later being played and being, critiqued, being analyzed, talks to how people are feeling, what the mood of the day is, and why it's so important for us to pay homage to young people who are creating in spaces that are sometimes difficult and challenging in their lives. We often don't realize that the artist too is a vessel of the music, and so their work is quite important as storytellers.
Thank you. DJ, one of the things that Thando just shared about music being the barometer of society is, from your art as a musician and your travels, how does that reflect upon you, and how do you see that?
Well, it definitely reflects upon me. I mean, just look at what's happening now. Even if you take to what's happening now, like she just mentioned, the Fight the Power song and the vibe of the music that's influencing now. I mean, just last week, I think it was, a couple big records came out from some of the younger hip hop artists. What's A Little Baby came out with a song, Black Lives Matter song. and then there was a couple others. I mean, music is just, I mean, it's just a reflection of the times, you know what I mean? And the vibe, because I haven't have a record that I was gonna drop this month, and it's a record called No Other Love, but it's more of a feel good, upbeat song. But I pushed it back because that's not the mood and the vibe that I'm in, and that's not. I don't feel that's the vibe that we are in at this time. You know, there's a lot of stuff that is going on that we need to pay attention to. We need to be, you know, to be vigilant, and there's a lot of stuff that's impacting our moods, and music is about moods. It's about vibrations. So you have to feel what's happening around you and go with that energy. You know what I mean? So I think exactly what Thando was mentioning, with just at that time, you know, those songs were coming out because that's what, you know, the energy was going on at the time. People were dealing with a lot of things. I think that was right around when the Rodney King thing happened, and you know, there was other things happening around that time, and this still stuff happens till today, but it's just coming to the forefront now with these, you know, social media and these cameras. And so people are seeing a lot of the brutality and injustice that we're facing. So I think it's a powerful time, and I think the music has to reflect it, you know?
Mhm. You know, Thando, how do you see that? You know, you talked about some very key figures in history of music here in Toronto. What are some of the how did they, you know, Norman opened a lot of doors for folks. Who are some of the folks that you think are continuing that work now, or that have had influences on yourself, and you think in the movements that we've seen here in Toronto?
Oh, there's so many, because at the time that we were creating music as young folk, we didn't have access to platforms. And so we often had to we often were invited into spaces that they gave us an opportunity to perform. And I'm going to ask Power to jump in to help me here, because even when we think of Ron Nelson's show,
Right.
as well as the Master Plan show on 89.5 CIUT-FM, I'm still on 89.5 CIUT-FM. Can you believe it? Some 30 odd years later, right? And so these were seminal shows where it was called underground because there was no mainstream platform for young people who were involved and engaged in resistance music to have an outlet, to have a space. So I remember even the strip of clubs on Queen Street having those venues to perform in, because it was not the music of the day like it is today. It was brand new. It was out of the inner city, the urban grit, call it brick and mortar conversations were happening. But it was also a music that was being recreated by what I call the subculture of young people at that time, many of whom were children of immigrant families who came to North America and used the music of their parents' generation and recreated that, made their own spin, took their own spin off the music. I was also pleasantly surprised rather recently to know that many of those children were like first and second generation born, right? We always thought, well, I don't know about you, Power, but we always thought that all this hip hop that was coming out of the epicenter of the United States, that being New York, we always thought that the music was being created by quote unquote African Americans, like, you know, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh generation. And not to say that it couldn't be, but to learn that, wait a second, all these people that we were listening to all their music from was, you know, their parents are from Trinidad, their parents are from Jamaica, their parents are from Barbados, They came to New York as young children. Nobody told us that. And I also think about the fact that maybe at the time, they weren't able to reveal their cultural identity because it was not necessarily chic at the time to say who your family was in America. Different though, in Toronto in particular, because we are the children of people who came to this country. Not that there weren't African that produced, but it was a groundswell of young people who wanted a change, and they dug into their parents' crates because they knew all the music, R&B, calypso, reggae, from Bob Marley to, Marvin Gaye. They knew Peter Tosh's music, and they said, let's try to think about how we can create those beats and loops. And so, when I look at DJ Power, I'm thinking about the fact that when we were members of New Black Nation, I never forget when DJ Power's father, Miguel San Vicente, turned. And I don't know if you remember this, Derek, but it was really, really insightful to me at the time as a young person, saying, he said to him, you need to create a song with the pan music in it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, really? Oh, I never thought about it, because they were always pushing us, pushing those boundaries to like go a little further, dig a little deeper. And we were like, oh, okay, that's interesting, right? I know, Derek being the DJ and producer, he would come up with all these fantastic beats, right? That wasn't necessarily my niche, right? He can speak to that. But then when I heard 50 Cent's song, what's that song?
Oh, Pimp, P-I-M-P.
Yeah, P-I-M-P.
Yeah.
I'm like, shoot. Shoot. You can do this on a, high scale, on a high level. So it really talks about how we came together and supported one another. And that's the other thing. There was a lot, we created our own community because there was no space for us.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Thando. DJ, like, talk about how those working class roots influenced, not only, the musicians that you listen to, but how your creative self and the direction that you've gone with your career.
Well, basically, I mean, it's just being humbled and being around people. And like she was mentioned, like my father was always active in the community and being a part of the Black Action Defense Committee and other unions and organizing. So we would like be always aware of what's going on, and always be like community oriented in terms of even the place where I have my studio. I mean, people would come in there, from an early age, like people are just coming there, like hanging out. It's almost like a little small community center, and people would just be creating. It's just a great creative space, and just giving that to people so they're not like, and you would just meet so many different people like that are still friends to this day. Just being around that great energy, and I feel like that was something that grounded me, just the fact of people from all walks of life, you know what I mean? Just coming in like, and just hanging out and being able to create. And then, some people would, everybody had their different, outside of music, everybody was into something else, but at the same time, that's what brought us together. And I think that humbleness, just to not look at where you come from or who you are, it's more about building. I think like that developed a strong bond, I feel, that laid a foundation for where you are today. So you keep that attitude and keep that mentality, even to today, dealing with bigger artists or dealing with so-called, celebrities. But at the end of the day, it's just people that's just creating.
Who are some of your influences, like in regards to like musicians that really that you remember growing up and like, yo, that's the sound, that's my feeling? Like, did you have some folks that really influenced the direction that you went?
Well, definitely as a kid, I would probably have to say, definitely say Bob Marley, because that's what we would listen to. Like as a kid, I just remember, and then other reggae, like my father used to play a lot of reggae and a lot of African music. So I was introduced to African music at an early age, Fela Kuti and all these artists, Miriam Makeba and all these Afro artists. And then my mom would introduce me to other like soul music, Bob James and like all these soul music artists and like, Prince and Michael Jackson, all that stuff. Like, so everybody like played a role, I guess, in my musical influence growing up. And then, for me, developing my talents, I just always like would listen to the radio, like big up people like who were on the radio early, you know, like the Ron Nelsons and all those people allowed you to hear different stuff that you wouldn't normally hear, you know. So I think like just having an open ear and being willing to just embrace music and not really judge it, you know, in terms of you're like this, you only listen to this. I never really felt that. I really felt like even when it wasn't proper to listen to all these different genres, but you know, it's music and you just love it and just have an open mind to it. That's what influenced.
Thando, how about yourself? Who were some of the musical influences that influenced you growing up?
They are varied as varied as they are, that as DJ Power has spoken about, because in our household, music was like the center. Music formed the center for everything that we did, right? And so my dad was a huge music aficionado, and you know those homes where you have wall to wall,
Yep.
right? And you've got the turntables and the sound system. Even to this day, I'm like, what's up with the little rinky-dink speaker? Like, no.
Yeah, like that's not what we grew up with.
I don't need that.
The homemade speakers, the big, yeah.
That's right. And so you learn very early on, right? Like what the amplifier is and the speaker and the microphone, like it was a solid sound system and we learned a lot from it. And my father played a lot of R&B, a lot of soul, jazz, reggae, blues, the classical, same African music, Fela Kuti, Manu Dibango, and the good thing about what he also used to do was, we always thought like, how did this guy understand this stuff? He would always play the music before it broke, right? Before we heard it on the radio, he would always have the hit song, the hit record. I used to be like, how do you know all this stuff? And it hasn't come out yet, right? Like,
right.
Where did this from, right? So we'd be listening to music before it became popular, right? And throughout his life, that's what he did. And interestingly enough, music was such a part of our life growing up that, you know, we even had times for music to be played. Sunday, we always started with gospel music, right? And so I knew every gospel singer, from, you know, Shirley Chisholm down to give me a name. Aretha Franklin was a main staple in our household, and then reggae. So with respect to reggae, we heard what I would consider to be like the roots foundation reggae, Bob Marley's reggae, and then the whole subculture of dancehall. Everything from Yellow Men to give me a name. Like, we heard it all. So it was very eclectic. It wasn't just one genre of music that we listened to. And I think that had to deal with the Pan-African flavor that my parents had, right? As social justice activists, they had many friends. They moved around the world very differently. So they might have come from the Caribbean, but they worked and lived, played, and interacted with many people from around the world. So those influences were naturally things that they shared with their children. And even in terms of music, you know that music is also very much a part of social life, festivals, celebrations, the food that you eat even, right? So we were also introduced to food from some of the music that we heard, right? I mean, there was just things that you heard when you're at a particular location, right? When you're eating this particular food, you're gonna hear, you're gonna hear salsa, you're gonna hear just so many different beats, right? So, and then what I was very appreciative of is that we learned the history of music as it went along, right? So my dad in particular would talk about why this song came out on this particular date with this particular liner note, who played on the album, what was happening in the day. He even had EPs and long playing records from like The Last Poets, um, like just so many, I can't even remember all the names, right? And sometimes he would put on sermons because remember at the time, we've lived long enough to go through the 4 different technologies in music, right? Um, the
Records.
from the record all the way to streaming. But back then, if you wanted the cutting edge stuff, you had to hear sermons being played, Martin Luther King's work. I mean, we heard everything. So, but I mean, I had a love for R&B as well, right? And that's partly how I learned to sing. I was very, loving all of my musical influences like Aretha Franklin down to Denise Williams, etc. And then also delved into hip hop, into rap, because we also heard all the hip hop in the house. Like my dad was the one to bring home Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five and everything. Like it just goes on and on. So I don't want to digress, but it was a lot.
Mm-hmm. And DG Power, like, one of the songs I don't know if you saw the new Spike Lee joint that just came out, The Five Brothers, and he does what he does as an artist, weaving so much things in. But one of the songs that I always you always hear, it reminds me of that moment when Dr. Martin Luther King died, and invariably they'll play Sam Cooke's "A Change Is Gonna Come," right? And so even if you weren't born then, I feel like it's something like oh, that reminds me of the moment when I learned that Martin Luther King died. And I mean, like in the movie, it's a powerful moment because these Vietnam War vets are like in Vietnam, and they're hearing this announcement of him dying, and then they play the song underneath, and then you all of a sudden hear about all of the black men that are over in Vietnam fighting on behalf of the United States, yet their leader gets shot and killed. And so to bring it back to that particular song had such an impact, obviously, on the on the movement. And I'm just wondering, are there other songs, other artists, in your opinion, DJ Power, that have had a similar influence on our society in regards to social justice movements?
Yeah, there's tons of songs. It's just like, obviously you go back, like that example you gave was farther back, but I think that was also used in Malcolm X movie, right?
Yeah.
That song. So yeah, that song kind of, you're right. It actually, it's a kind of brings you to that place whenever you hear it. But then like, not just like I was talking to somebody from Zimbabwe the other day, and they're telling me, yeah, when that song came out, the Zimbabwe song that he did, like, it was just over there, because they were, telling me how it was over there. And it's just like those type of songs, like when you touch on a moment and you touch on like something that impacts the people at that point, that can obviously, influence and like create a vibe, a vibration that like helps propel things or helps change, helps to like not only be in the background of the change, but sometimes be the inspiration, for other people to get involved and stuff like that. So there's many songs, like, one song that I always referred to was when was Ice Cube, when he came out and he did a whole album where he was talking about different things with police brutality. Not just when they did the NWA did the Fuck the Police, but after that he had kind of like an EP, and he was talking about like a lot of the injustice that was going on with police brutality and like the systematic white supremacist system and a lot of stuff that was going on. So him being from the side, the gangster rapper side, and coming out and putting some stuff in people's minds was really impactful, because the people that followed him, they might not necessarily would have, heard or listened to some of those messages, but he was dropping some gems, on people. And I think there's been like lots of examples of that, you know, for people dropping things in their music, like even singers, like it doesn't have to be a rapper, you know, it could be singers, it could be like the Erykah Badu's or whoever, like there's people that, you know, drop gems. You just have to, you know, Alicia Keys, big up, you know, a lot of people that, you know, in Black music, we, as long as we are in tune with our people and what's going on at the time, I mean, it naturally should come out, you know, and I think it is important, like, and that's why I feel like sometimes I look and I see people promoting, like, it's like even now, like with all this stuff that's happening, like at this time, and then some people are promoting this song about, I don't know, it could be something, some random thing, but it's kind of like people are not going to gravitate as well because it's like, what are you talking about? You're chilling on the beach or whatever, you know, but it's not, you gotta be not tone deaf to what's going on around you. And if you are, you know, doing a music that was a Black music, which is most of the music that is out or derived from, then, you know, you got to reflect the people and the struggles that, you know, that we're going through, or whatever the issues are that we're going through, you know what I mean? So,
Even the terminology, like before we knew it to be Black music, and
which
now
one?
the terminology,
Yeah.
before we knew it to be Black music, now it's called urban music.
Yeah, I hate that.
You know, the terminology, it tells you a lot. I was listening to these artists talk about who came up with the terminology like neo soul, and it wasn't the artist that coined it. It's always the people that are monetizing the music that
Right.
shift and change. They never seem to ask the artist what they think, but because it needs to be packaged and distributed to a particular set of people, things shift and change. And so I think about artists in particular, like Marvin Gaye with What's Going On.
Yeah.
Marley, his entire catalog. I mean, we knew the words front to back, back to front, every single album, right? Because everything that he sung about, even if it was love, had a message of resistance. And you mentioned DJ Power, Alicia Keys, or Kendrick Lamar, like in
Right.
today, the Fugees, for example.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Yeah.
I spoke earlier about Public Enemy. And so everybody has a place in music history where they really talk about what's happening in the society. And you're right, Power, when you talk about the fact that sometimes there are musicians, there are artists who really sit down and create a good song. And their followers, their audience, don't necessarily listen to that particular genre or that particular song, but because the artist created that, it opens their ears
Right.
more than not. So you know, there's a lot. Stevie Wonder is another person who, you know, and when you think about the backstories to how and why they even produce things, what's going on, Marvin Gaye's album, the record company never wanted him to put it out. Even Stevie Wonder songs
Yes.
didn't want him to put it out. And these songs turn out to be time-tested, historical, true and
Yeah,
true.
that's probably Marvin Gaye's biggest album of his career, and that wasn't supposed to come out.
That's right, correct. And so, like, even when I think of that song, Sam Cooke's song, A Change Is Gonna Come. Sam Cooke was actually killed at the height of his career when he was trying to organize Black artists, particularly in the South, because he wanted to develop his own record label. It was totally unheard of at that time. And Sam Cooke sat and said he wanted to pen a song that would stand the test of time. It took him a long time to pen this song, but the song turns out to be none other than A Change Is Gonna Come, right? Even he wasn't as pleased with his song when he completed it, but he did what he needed to do, right? And we will forever remember him, and we'll forever be indebted to him with respect to that song, A Change Is Gonna Come. I don't know if you've seen the internet blowing up, but that song is probably now one of the most re-recorded, highly re-recorded songs ever.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, like, well, I mean, now, like everybody's singing a different version of it.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, it's out, and I mean, it's beautiful. No matter who sings it, it's time tested.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we've talked a little bit about the history and some of the influences that have happened in the past, but like what are we going to do today? I mean, Black Lives Matter, and Not Another Black Life has been, they've done a call out actually. I believe it's this weekend coming up, sit in. Anyway, so how are we going to, how is music, especially specifically our Black musicians, going to help with this revolutionary movement that's happening right now? The fund the police, look, how do we, have deal with the issues in education? How, in your opinions, how are musicians today helping with that, or should be helping with that?
It's interesting because during the COVID-19 pandemic, I was privy to Black Lives Matter actually putting out a call to support artists in our community, because the industry was shut down for them essentially. Nobody's going to clubs, concerts, they're not able to produce their art in whichever medium it was. And so Black Lives Matter was asking for support, financial support to be given to our artists, because our artists also help us set the tone and the stage for what is happening historically in society. And so this new generation of young people are starting to recreate music that makes sense for them. And so as an artist, that's what we need to be able to do. Just like we have this dear sister, Nicole Alexander, who is recreating, hey Nicole, who is recreating art as we are speaking. That mirrors some of the work that we've started to do, or artists have started to do, when it comes to any kind of conversation that impacts people of African descent. So in North America, we have a youth movement that has taken on a new form and a new shape. Remember that youth are the spark of the resistance movement in any generation. So we expect that our young people will challenge the status quo. We expect that they will push the boundaries and challenge us to think and rethink systems and structures that oppress and exploit large groups of people. In this particular case, it would be Black people. And the conversation that is being had right now is that this is not just endemic to America, because it's very easy for us to devolve into a conversation that, they shot and killed George Floyd in the United States, and this problem is just south of the border. That's not the case. The conversation is, how has racism and racist practices embedded itself in systems and structures that cause oppression to large groups of people, including Black people, including people of African descent. And so our young people are raising their voices through a variety of means. Petitions are happening on the internet. Sit-ins, marches, songs are being created. There are conversations being had in many spaces and places, town hall meetings, organizations are popping up, and organizations such as the one that you're also a member of, Urban Alliance, founding organizations are trying to unite with young people to say, well, what do we need to do? So this is not just, as we say, a moment, but a movement of resistance that is not necessarily just about mobilization, but it is about organization, because people are seeing that, what I call this the perfect storm, right? I think that given the history of people in North America and the kind of conditions that they were faced with in the last few months, one could understand, with all these very tiered levels of what was happening in their lives, one could see how an explosion, an eruption, a disruption would occur. You've got the United States of America in particular, which has the highest rates of people of African descent that are dying. And it's not that they're dying with the COVID-19. It's not that they're dying because of because people couldn't assist them, but there is a health-related aspect to COVID-19. We read the stories. You had young people in the city of New York that were dying, that were being turned away from the hospitals. So it was access or poor access to healthcare. So even the health of Black people was being challenged. Then you have young people, many of whom right now are unemployed and out of work due to COVID-19. And then you have people who year after year after year are seeing the atrocities being leveled against people of African descent, Black people, especially Black males, right? And they're not necessarily resisting arrest, but the treatment meted out to them is far more draconian and far more vicious and violent than other groups, right? So here everything converges, and people, we heard of the Black Lives Matter movement, but then it became enough is enough. What do you do when enough is enough? A couple of days ago, it was the international, yesterday actually, was the International Day of the African Child. What was that about? In 1976, young people took to the streets to demand increased quality education in South Africa, right? They defied their parents. Their parents told them, don't go out and protest. Their parents told them, don't go out and march, because we know what will happen to you in terms of the state. But they said, you know, they were very firm and very clear that they wanted to lend their voices to speak out against injustice. And despite the fact that we know that there are several repercussions when you speak out against injustice, they said, we've got to do something. So whether you're an artist and you're lending your voice, you're painting, you're producing, you're singing, you're dancing, or whether you're finding a way to protest in social pro-social ways, this is what's happening right now. A lot is happening, and our children are now seeing what the world looks like and have an opportunity to help shape the future of the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Power. What do you think? Like, what are some of the musicians today? How can they help shape, build, help us move forward in this time of, as Thando pointed out, COVID, in this time of defund the police, in this time of enough is enough?
Well, especially in this time right now, like you said, COVID is on, and then this happening. I'd say the first thing is use your voice. As an artist, you probably have a significant amount of following, whether it's small or big, but usually people gravitate towards your art and your art form. So then you can use that voice to spread information about what's going on. You can use your voice to share petitions that are being signed. You can use your voice to go out to these demonstrations. You can use your voice. You can use things to raise money to donate to some of these organizations that are doing stuff. I mean, that's what my first reaction was when all of this was happening, you know what I mean? Was to obviously spread the word and not be afraid to speak out and just get the word out, because the first thing is to get the word out of what's going on so people can be aware and realize that they're not alone, and like, you know, that there's other people that are supporting or willing to support, you know, that against the injustice that's happening. So some people may be on the fence, but when they see other people that they look up to or they follow shedding the light, then it's important, because it gets other people involved, and that's what you need to do at first. And then on the music side, you know, you can like, one of the things I'll be doing, I have a EP coming out, it's called Rebel Music, and it's going to be, you know, with some artists that it's going to be dealing with some of the issues that, you know, that we're talking about. You can do it musically. You can also, there's a ways to donate some of your streams to some of the organizations or some things that are happening, and that there's an easy way to do it on the platforms. That right now you just go on your even if you go on your Spotify or whatever, you can donate. You can, easily, they have an easy system set up where you can pick a group of or organization of your choice. Those are things you can do to help. And then, like I said, just talk to people, man. Talk to people. Sometimes, music is, like I was explaining before, it's about a vibe. And over these last few weeks, I haven't had any vibe to create because there was no energy to do it. So you need to speak out to other people, and talk about what you're facing, because it's like as a people we have like a form of what they call, what is it, PSTD or PTSD. It's like,
Yes.
all of this stuff is influence us. There's nights I couldn't even sleep. It's like you can't even, there's a lot of mental things that we're not really discuss a lot, but that goes with these things, that you may wake up with nightmares, and you may wake up with, thoughts about how your kids are gonna deal with certain things, or, so there's a lot of things that affect you mentally, and it goes in, and why you can't create or why you can't do music. So I feel like you should use what you can at the moment. If you're not in the mood to create, then do other things. Like I said, talk to people, try to get some different perspectives and help you to deal with what everybody's facing.
Mm-hmm. The educator in me would also say that we need to continue to build critical consciousness. We need to educate ourselves about what is happening in the world, because we can talk about protests and civil unrest, but we also have to talk about the history of such. So asking and reading about, well, what is systemic discrimination? Because oftentimes these terminologies are thrown around and many people don't know what they are. What is oppression? What is racism? What is the bias or the unspoken or unconscious bias? And what does that look like in everyday lived society? We can have these big terms, but being able to apply it and relate it to specific, realistic, practical experiences are very helpful. Having these conversations with children who may be experiencing the trauma of COVID-19 and the trauma of civil unrest and protests, what that looks like, the trauma of seeing police violence in their communities. How are we going to identify the strategies and coping mechanisms for young people to talk about their feelings, share their feelings, and address those feelings? Those are big pieces, right? I have kids, and I know that they were personally impacted by what's happening in the world right now. And just as you said, Power, the same things have happened. How our bodies carry this trauma, right? How our bodies carry this pain, right? Some of this pain is generational, right? Some of this pain is intergenerational. And what we do to positively address these issues needs to come to the fore, because it's one thing for you to see it and for you to talk about it. It's another thing for you to do something about it, even in your soul. I remember even seeing that vivid image of Mr. Floyd, and I hadn't seen the image for weeks, right? I heard everybody talk about it, but I didn't see the image. And I remember my children saying, like, Mom, Mom, what's happening? Like, Mom, is this true? And I remember saying to my eldest daughter that, listen, this is why you need to be a student of history. Okay, this is why you need to understand your history and your culture, because once you understand it, you will be able to make better sense of what's happening in the world, right? And so if we don't help young people to develop that critical consciousness, right, they will be doomed to repeat the same mistakes, and or they won't make positive contributions to their future, to their lives, right? I always grew up with the motto that the purpose in life is to make this world a better place for our children and our children's children. And if we're not doing that, whether it's in the sphere of education that I'm in, or whether it's in being an artist, then what are we doing? How are we going to heal ourselves? How are we going to heal our world? How are we going to bring hope to our young people while still teaching them that they need to be resilient, right? I don't know if you've seen this video that's flying around the internet, which is, how to have that talk with your children, right? Because no longer are the blinders on. You have to rip the Band-Aid off because it's right there for them to see. They're not going anywhere. They're stuck indoors. Well, now maybe not, but if you turn on the news, this is what you see. So how do we have these conversations with children, right? And how do we take them through the various stages of trauma? Because one of the stages of trauma is anger, right? And so misplaced anger and fear creates a whole section of mental health issues that have also plagued our community. And so I support the work that young people continue to do to address these concerns in ways that are able to make them express their ideas, express themselves, right? But heal themselves, because we do need to do these things simultaneously.
Thank you. Wow, thank you for bringing all of that out. And we're critical consciousness. I think is going to be an important message for us to leave the People's Podcast on. And we just hope that we can have the both of you back again sometime in the future, very soon. DJ Power, how can our viewers get a hold of you?
They could hit me on IG, Instagram at DJ Power Music. And the same for Twitter, it's at DJ Power Music. That's the best way to get a hold of me. Facebook is DJ Power and djpowermusic.com.
All right. Any last thoughts that you wanted to share with folks?
Just in these times, talk to your people, spread the word, just basically, and do what we can to fight against what's happening, man. That's pretty much it. Don't be silent, use your voice, use what you can to, as Motion would say, use what you got, right? So, so I would say that's pretty much it.
Okay. And Thando, how can folks get a hold of you? I mean, I know how to get a hold of you, but if folks want to kind of pick your brain a little bit more, how might they get a hold of you?
Well, they could hit me up. I have my email. Normally people just reach out to me via email, which is thando.hyman@tdsb.on.ca.
Perfect.
You can also look me up on Twitter, and we should continue the conversation because silence is complicity.
And is there any last thoughts that you want to share with folks on top of the silence being complicity? Which was great.
That means that we should continue our dialogue. And I really want to thank a different book list, the People's Book List, for giving me this opportunity, giving us this opportunity to sit down and share our contributions to Black Music Month and talk about our journey in life, where it's led us, from whence we came to where it's led us. So wishing you all the best, be healthy and be well.
Yes, thank you to different book lists, of course. Big up. Big up. And big up to Nicole, the artist.
Just about to say,
check her out. I need one of those paintings, so you gotta send me what you got. So
Nicole, how do we get a hold of you, Nicole?
You can reach me on Facebook at my Facebook page, which is Nicole Alexander Art, or you can email me. My website's down at the moment. You can email me, and I have Instagram as well under Nicole Alexander Art.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicole. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Thank you. So that's the end of another episode of the People's Podcast. Don't forget, you can hit us up at hashtag the People's Residence. Please send us an email if you need to get a hold of us at adbcc.ca, and look out for more future events. Oh yeah, I'm on the board, so I'm supposed to say, if you really like what we're doing, please donate, and you can do so on our website. Nicole, Thando, Power, love. Thank you for your knowledge and dropping it all for us today. One love.
One love. Bless.
Thank you. Bye.